Okay, let's talk about schools of thought inside of comparative politics. Um, Sometimes these might be called theories. You might hear them called paradigms. For now, I'm just going to call them, generally throughout the semester, I'll call them schools of thought. So there's different ways of explaining comparative politics, of answering open questions. Not everybody agrees on how to do this. And that's, of course, consistent throughout the social sciences. There are huge disagreements within the ivory tower over how best to answer open questions scientifically. And we're going to look at, I'm going to give you four. And I'm going to try to explain them through sort of a personal anecdote. But first up, we've got rationalism. Rationalism, or rational choice theory. Rational choice theory comes from economics. It focuses on individual choices. You take an individual or a group of individuals and you look at the incentive structure, the situation that they face, and the economic, material pros and cons of that situation in terms of them, in order to explain their choices. Okay? This, we might call it conservative school of thought, in a way. More on that later. To the extent that there are conservatives in social sciences, you might find them, they might be more likely to be rational choice theorists. And economics traditionally has been a little bit more conservative than other social sciences. All right. Okay. So you look at the pros and cons for individuals to explain their behavior. All right. Now, that can be very good, but a lot of people don't like it. Not just because it's conservative, but because people tend to make some crazy choices. So do governments, so do societies, that are not necessarily explained well by the incentive structure. They choose things that appear to be rashly in opposition to the incentive structure. Another way of explaining things is what's called culturalism. Culture is very important for culturalists. How do you explain the difference between one society's development and another one's lack of development? Well, maybe it's culture. What's culture? It's all kinds of things, but it's the things you believe. It's your manners, your morals, your religion, your ethical systems, etc. Those things, according to culturalists, are where we should start. Okay. Similar to culturalism are institutionalists. These are people that say institutions matter. So, and those institutions can be very formal, like bureaucracy, the military, the government itself, your taxation system, police system. The stronger they are, the more capable the state is of providing goodies, benefits for their citizens. Okay, so strong versus weak institutions. Trick there can be defining what exactly is an institution. Some people define it very broadly to include just basic rules, do's and don'ts. But generally we're going to talk about in terms of formal institutions. Now, here's my anecdote. I mentioned before that I lived in Ecuador for a year and a half teaching English. As is often the case when you teach English overseas, you'll find yourselves having conversations with established people whose English is really already quite good, and they just want conversation partners. And I had one of those, and he was a very highly placed attorney in Quito, the capital of Ecuador, and he knew everybody, and he knew all the corruption stories. And Ecuador has a lot of corruption. But he was the one who told me about a phenomenon. Ecuador has a lot of corruption, and neighboring Chile does not, for whatever reasons. and the kind of somewhat humorous, darkly humorous story about Ecuadorian tourists who find themselves in Chile. Maybe they're in the capital, Santiago, and they're pulled over by a traffic cop. And what do you think the Ecuadorian tourist does? Tries to pay his way out of it, offers the police officer a bribe. And instantly, that Ecuadorian tourist finds him or herself in a world of trouble because you never try to bribe Chilean traffic cops. All right. So, why is this done? Which school of thought helps explain this the best? Well, rational choice theorist is going to look at the incentives. The Ecuadorian citizen, the Ecuadorian tourist, is used to a situation where it's better for them as individuals to pay the bribe than to try to fight it. Because if you go through the legal system, you're going to get screwed. It's slow, it's under-resourced, there's not enough judges, and there's really no chance of you getting in trouble for bribing the Ecuadorian police officer. There's a chance, but it's overall easier financially as well as in terms of your time, resources, all that. So the rational choice theorist explains the Ecuadorian tourist in that way. And how about the Chilean cop, the Chilean police officer? It's in that person's best interest to obey the rules because they really could get in trouble if they accept a bribe. All right, so that's the rational choice theory way of explaining that. But is there anything else to it that you might think about? What about right and wrong? The Chilean police officer may be really offended. And so it's not just that the Chilean police officer is worried about his job, his or her job. It's that he really does not believe in bribes. There's a way of doing things, and bribery is bad, and that police officer is not going to put up with that. It's never going to countenance it. How do we explain that? That would be culturalist. It's within Chilean culture that bribery and corruption are bad. And in Ecuadorian culture, it's normal. You do what you got to do. So that's a cultural explanation. It looks at the same problem, gets the same conclusion roughly, but in a slightly different way. Instead of focusing on the material best interest for the individuals at stake, you're focusing on larger things like what are the beliefs in your society. Institutionalists will take the same thing and they'll say, very similar to these other two explanations, but basically just focusing on the institutions themselves. So in Ecuador, the cops, I mentioned this as part of the economic analysis, but the police is underfunded, underpowered, entirely dysfunctional, so they can't really properly train people to not accept bribes. They may not even be trying to do that. The court system is also corrupt, underfunded, etc. It has no capability of punishing people. The educational system is not competent enough. Maybe civil society is not strong enough to create a situation in which Ecuadorians are taught to view corruption as immoral, right? Meanwhile, Chilean institutions, for whatever reasons, are strong. They have strong police funding, strong training. They have a stronger court system than Ecuador. So you take the same situation and you come in here and you look at it in similar but different ways. There's definitely some overlap there. Did I mention 4? Yeah, let's look at the 4th. And these are going to be the critical theories. These are the more what we'll call left. Theories from the left. And some of them have part of the Marxist tradition, and some of them aren't really, but generally they're critical of the way we view things. So a critical theorist is going to look at these three explanations, these three schools of thought, and say, who are you calling corrupt? Have you seen how the United States works? Stop blaming the victim. The Ecuadorians are not at fault for their own corruption. They were born into a system that was formed because of the external capitalist powers, especially the United States, coming down there and telling them what they can and cannot do. So that's a very different type of explanation, and we'll look at that more. But that's one of the other sets of schools of thoughts inside of comparative politics. We'll be looking at those four, roughly, over the course of the semester. And for me, that's kind of a fun part, so you're welcome.